prove that he was not by asking him to provide information about the company that he's no longer involved with. And that reverse onus, Chair, is not something that we as parliamentarians should be dealing with. We are elected by our constituents to be honorable in this place, to work with integrity and with honor. And I believe that the majority of us do. And I'm not just talking about the Liberal benches. I know that the majority of my Conservative colleagues feel the same way. They're here to serve their constituents. And I would remind them to serve your constituents, folks. This issue, very much like the apology we heard today of Mr. Baines, is the same. Let's not defame each other for clicks, for clickbait, or for fundraising opportunities, or whatever it is that you want to achieve out of doing this. Let's not drag in private citizens to this committee to put them in a situation where they're now being harassed, where they're now being put in a position that is harmful to them. So I think that this motion should not pass. Now, if we focus on the date that this conversation is supposed to have happened, Mr. Chair, between Randy, as has been previously noted, on September 8th of 2022, Minister Boissonnault was in Vancouver. He was attending a cabinet retreat, and we know that this was a day that was especially hectic because it was the day that Queen Elizabeth passed away. So the Conservatives are expecting us to believe that sometime during that day-long cabinet retreat meeting, where ministers don't have access to their phones, and even in our own caucus meetings, Chair, we don't have access to our phones. And as cabinet was being updated on the death of our head of state, that Minister Boissonnault was stepping in and out to take phone calls about a business that he had resigned from a year earlier. I find that really difficult to believe, Chair. And I think that dragging people through the mud is not acceptable. We have to do better. We have to do better as committee members on the issues that we bring forward. Chair, I watched my own motion on artificial intelligence and social media and their role on privacy of Canadians be completely killed in this committee after we had spent months and months and months on it. After I've personally experienced 2 kids having committed suicide in my riding based on cyberbullying, whose funeral I went to. And that motion, that study, the amount of time that we had spent on witnesses coming in, on our analysts putting together a report, for that to be quashed, I think that we have better things to do in this committee, Chair. I think that we need to focus in on what issues we need to discuss in this committee. We need to ensure that we are talking about and studying and working on the issues that Canadians want us to work on, that is having real impact on Canadians, rather than conjecture, rather than us vilifying each other for clickbait, for social media. I'm sure that there's some competition going on somewhere as to who can get more likes based on what their tweets are. Does that do us any favors? I don't think so. And that's exactly what this motion is about. It is not about making sure that our lobbying act is really performing for Canadians. It is not about making sure that our Conflict of Interest Act makes sure that we are accountable to Canadians on the work that we do and how we conduct ourselves. It's really about dragging people through the mud, whether they're parliamentarians or ministers or whether they're private citizens. And that is not acceptable, Chair. We have to do better. We have to make sure that the work that this committee is doing is the work that Canadians need us to do at this point. And this motion is very frivolous. It has no objective other than clickbait. It has no objective other than to create a frenzy. It has no objective other than to defame Canadians, private Canadians, as well as parliamentarians. And I think that we can do better than that. Mr. Chair, it's been a difficult couple of weeks, I'm sure, for a lot of us. And how we conduct ourselves in this chamber is very important. How we raise the issues that are important to Canadians is very important. And the fact that we cannot come together and figure out what Canadians need most at this time is disappointing. And I think what Canadians need most at this time, because my own youth council has said so, my own women's council had said so, my constituents write to me on a regular basis. Can we have trust in our democratic institutions? Can we have trust in the people that we elect? And the fact of the matter is, when we defame one another in this place, just as Mr. Brock apologized to Mr. Baines earlier today for defaming him, can we put that partisan politics aside and come together and say, look, these are the issues that Canadians want us to work on? Do we need to study the Lobbying Act and find loopholes and fix them? Absolutely. Do we need to make sure that parliamentarians are held to account for their actions? Absolutely, by each other and by Canadians. But should we be defaming parliamentarians? Should we be dragging in private citizens into this committee and making speculatory accusations against people? Absolutely not. Where we have the privilege of representing our communities, we also have the responsibility of being parliamentarians with integrity. And I don't think that it's right for us to be putting people in that position where we accuse them of being guilty and then we drag them into our committee to prove that they're innocent. That's not the right approach. That's not the Canadian way of doing things, Mr. Chair. We have to be better. And there are so many more important things that we can do collectively on a consensus basis. And I've worked with all of my colleagues at this table on consensus, on issues that matter to each and every one of us. Let's not go down this route of clickbait. Let's not go down this route of defamation. Let's find the right way of solving the issues that each and every one of us may have, that our constituents tell us that we may have. How do we improve our democracy? It's not by defamation. It's not by, by public flogging. It's by having reasonable conversations with each other. It's by talking about issues and not people. And I think that we have the ability and the opportunity to do that. And I encourage all of my colleagues at this table to do the same. Folks, we are privileged to be sitting at this table. We have an obligation to Canadians to set a standard, to set and to work with Canadians to ensure that we're doing right by them, to set an example of how we should be functioning as a country. And all 338 of us have an obligation to do that. And by presenting motions like this, and motions in the past in this committee where we drag people in and we say, you know, explain yourself, prove that you're innocent. Why? Why are we doing that? It's not fair to industry, it's not fair to private citizens, and it's not fair to each and every one of us. I think that we really need to rise above and ensure that we are working in a nonpartisan way or a multi-partisan way, whatever way you want to frame it, to ensure that the issues that our constituents raise for us are the ones that we are working on in this committee. I would have loved to continue our study on artificial intelligence, on TikTok, on social media, and how it impacts young people especially. But that's not what we're doing. And I think that we really need to ensure that we're getting there, that we're working on those issues, that we're protecting Canadians, because ultimately that's what they elected us for, folks. I'm not sure why I'm sitting here trying to help everyone here understand that we are elected to do a job to represent Canadians, and that motions like these, where we defame folks, where we drag them through the mud, it doesn't help anyone. In fact, what it does is that it takes away from the trust that Canadians have in our democratic institutions. Clickbait is not democracy, is not the way to ensure that democracy happens for us. Everybody at this table understands procedure in our House, in our committee, and committees across Parliament. We need to do better. We need to ensure that we are serving Canadians. And Mr. Chair, I'll come back to specifically the points raised by the Conservatives on the minister's integrity. I know the Conservatives are really clinging to this latest speculation about the minister being cleared by the Ethics Commissioner, because they know full well that the Ethics Commissioner looked into their previous allegations against the minister and they didn't find anything to cause an investigation. Mr. Barrett actually wrote the Ethics Commissioner, who is a neutral party, who is there to say whether or not there have been any violations of the Conflict of Interest Act. The Ethics Commissioner reviewed that letter and found no reason to look into this any further. So why are we using valuable committee time to continue this witch hunt? It makes no sense to me other than, just clickbait. The commissioner could not have been clearer at his testimony. He said explicitly that the minister, and I quote, complied with the rules under the Act and the Code. He reiterated in French, it appears that the minister has complied with the requirements of the Code and the Act with respect to matters relating to these companies and therefore there is no need to proceed with a study. And I know how much the Conservatives give regard to our ethics commissioner. I think he's a great guy. He's come and appeared before our committee many, many times, and we always had the highest regard for him. But God forbid that his opinion deflect from the Conservative clickbait. I think that if we are going to give regard to somebody and their opinion, who I hold in a lot of high regard, then we need to be quite consistent with how we apply those rules. And if the commissioner is saying that there's nothing here, this is a big, bad nothing burger, then why are we spending time in committee going over this? Why are we trying to defame? Why are we trying to use committee to clickbait and to question the integrity of not just parliamentarians or ministers, but private citizens that are just trying to do their work? I think we're better than that, Mr. Chair. So I'm going to leave my comments there, and I'm hopeful that we can come together in a consensus basis and find better things to do with our time here in this committee. We have Canadians to look after. We are elected to represent. We are elected to highlight, and we are elected to reform what challenges Canadians have. And I don't think that this is one of those issues, Chair. I think that the Conservatives need to stop using precious committee time to further their partisan objectives, to raise funds off of clicks, to fundraise off of the defamation of parliamentarians, of ministers, and of private companies in Canada. Not just in this instance, and I've seen it over the past number of years. I think that we can do better. I think that we need to get back on track in this committee and actually start talking about the real issues of ethics, of privacy, of access to information. And I think that the only way that we can do that is if we are all willing to put our partisan politics aside and come together for Canadians. If we are willing to ensure that we put our heads together on a consensus basis and actually talk about the real issues that Canadians deal with on a regular basis. And this is not one of them. This is far, far from it, Chair. So I'm hopeful that by the end of the meeting today, that we can come to a consensus and say, hey, folks, you know what? We're not going to defame anyone. We are not going to haul in people before this committee just to throw them through the ringer. We are going to ensure that we work on the real issues that Canadians care about, whether it's about access to information and ATIPs, whether it's about privacy and the role that social media and artificial intelligence has to play in how we conduct ourselves as a society. Those are real issues that Canadians care about. So I will leave it right there, Chair, and I'm hopeful that that my colleagues will find consensus. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Khalid. We've got roughly an hour till 1:45. Mr. Fisher, you're next on the list.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And Mr. Chair, one of the things I said when I was brand new to this committee which was only probably 3 or 4 weeks ago, was, and I remember saying to you, do we have a work plan? Are we working forward on a work plan? And you, with your sense of humor, you said, welcome to the shooting fish in a barrel committee, which I did find quite funny. And I've sat on committees for 8.5 years and sat on committees with many, 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 many ministers. and I've seen opposition members ask tough questions of the ministers, as they are wont to do. What I saw Tuesday, I didn't like. I didn't find it to be very fair. There was, I've seen in the House during things like Committee of the Whole and things like that where questions and answers are equal. I don't recall that at committee, but regardless, it was a lot of talking over and a lot of interrupting by everyone, in fairness. It wasn't a great committee meeting to be a part of. We have 338 of us in the House of Commons, and we're all colleagues. And I do remember 2015, 2016, 2017, where on a regular basis I'd cross the floor in the House and sit down with a chum from another party or a friend from the NDP or something, and I don't see that happening as much now. And I'm not sure if that has to do with the fact that there's less committee travel these days than there used to be. But again, going back to Tuesday, I found that this was a level of rancor that I don't think people back home want to see us engage in. I certainly know the people in Dartmouth Cole Harbour do not want to see that level of partisanship. I think that if you ask the average Canadian, you're innocent until you're proven guilty. And the sense that I get in some of the motions that have come forward recently, not just to this committee, certainly in a lot of committees, is a motion based on speculation or a media report that vilifies or almost presents, and it's in the debate of the motions as well, presents that person as guilty. I've seen names bandied about of general members of the public and heard that they've received vitriol through their emails or their phone numbers or through social media. And that's not fair. I mean, we sign up for this. I mean, in 2014, 15, I knocked on, I think, 26,000 doors in that 78-day election campaign. I don't think Canadians want to see this. I used to be on the Environment Committee and the National Defence Committee. I used to hear from people on a regular basis saying, really like the work that you folks are doing. We would get consensus on things. We actually did some really good reports. When I came on this committee just recently, we were talking about disinformation, misinformation, malinformation. And the chair mentioned numerous times to the witnesses that this is incredibly interesting. I could see it in the chair's eyes that he was riveted on what was coming up at committee. And I made a comment the other day about how this type of motion, these off-the-cuff shooting fish in a barrel motions that come to committee, which members have the right to do so. Members have every right to do so. They do interfere with the work plan. We really do need to continue studying things like MP Khalid said. When I looked at the work plan, and I think it was probably less than 5 or 6 hours after I think I joined this committee, Mr. Chair, you sent out a work plan, which was quite interesting. Some really good things, meaty topics that we could really dig into. And make no bones about it, this motion and motions like this do interrupt a really good work plan. They just do. One of the things I heard on Tuesday very, very clearly from the Ethics Commissioner was he was not looking to investigate this. What was presented to him was not worthy of an investigation. He said very clearly that he could not find any cause for an investigation. So yesterday in the House of Commons, Conservatives said, wrongly, I will say, that the Commissioner has opened up an investigation on what we heard Tuesday in a global news story, or Monday in a global news story. That's not true. He did not say he was opening an investigation. He just didn't say it. And then there was something else, I don't know where I heard it, maybe I read it on social media, that he was reopening the investigation. Also not true. There was no investigation. The minister followed through on all the things that the minister was required to do. As MPs, as PSs, as ministers, always do. Now, what the commissioner did say was that, and exactly what he would say when he heard comments made by Mr. Barrett, that he would look at it and decide if an investigation is warranted. Now, committees of the past would say, okay, well, we've got an officer of Parliament here that we have tasked with doing those things on occasion. What would a normal committee back in the day before they got so partisan and vitriolic? The committee would say, okay, well, the ethics commissioner said he's going to look into these new allegations. Normally, that's what you would do. You'd say, okay, well, that's what the ethics commissioner is going to do. He's going to look into those new allegations. And then wait for him to come back with the results of that investigation. Now, I think if you asked 100 people, surveyed 100 people, regular Canadians, if you surveyed 100 people and asked them, does that seem logical? There were some new allegations made because of a new story in the media. Would 95 of them say that makes sense? That this is what we'll do. We'll wait until the person tasked with ensuring that a minister of the Government of Canada has done what he must do to fulfill his requirements in that role. It makes perfect sense. He said, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but I think the commissioner said he could be back. I think he said August, which, I mean, we rise in a week or two. Made sense. That's the person that's tasked with checking into those types of things. But to say in the House of Commons yesterday that the commissioner has opened up an investigation, or for someone somewhere to suggest that there's a re-investigation or reopening an investigation, absolutely false. Not the case. Again, as he is supposed to do, he has said, absolutely, I will look into these new allegations. But he never said, I will investigate. He never said, I will reinvestigate. He never said, I will open an investigation. The minister was very, very clear, I felt, point blank, answered the questions. I'm not this other person. MP Khalid talked a lot about regular Canadians. I touched on it for a minute, but imagine inviting Kirsten Poon, you know. What would that do to her future? She would be dragged through the mud in this meeting by the Conservatives with partisan attacks. She would receive social media hate and vitriol, like I have recently, like other members of this side of the House have. You know, probably ruin any potential future for that person. Is that what we want to do? Do we want to drag people up to the bar of the House of Commons and interrogate them and ruin their lives and attack their mental health because they're business people? I'd like to think that we're not going in that direction. Something that the minister said yesterday, or sorry, the commissioner said day before yesterday, which I thought was really prudent, and it was good to hear. He said, I deal on facts, not on speculation. I suggest we allow him to dig into the facts to see if this is something that he sees as worth looking at. I don't think it's up to us to litigate that. I don't think it's up to us to invite regular Canadian business people in here and grill them before a committee of Parliament. I say let's let the commissioner look into this. Now, there was some talk also on the weekend about Minister Boissonneau's phone records. I felt it was a little bit like, I don't know what those legal shows are that used to be on NBC all the time. It felt like we were getting into some pretty interesting territory, but we can see very clearly, and I believe, and I go through the clerk for, just go through the clerk for a second to maybe for a head nod, that Minister Boissonnault wrote to the clerk this morning and shared the phone records of September 8th, 2022, through the chair to you, Madam Clerk. Wait, thank you so much. And they were submitted or distributed to the committee members? Excellent sharing. Excellent sharing. So every member has those records. We can see very clearly that there are no calls on that phone from 11:12 a.m. Pacific time and 5:37 p.m. Pacific time. That covers, Mr. Stand-in Chair, that covers the entire frame that Global News talks about in its coverage, and the time frame that Mr. Cooper, one of the two Michaels, brought up and talked about at length at our last meeting. Under the time frame, everyone involved was supposed to be on a partner call at 12:30 Pacific time. Clearly from this phone record, Minister Boissonnault was not that. Randy was not on that call. I do want to take a quick moment to thank Mr. Brock, as MP Khalid did, for his apology. Again, we do the bidding oftentimes of our parties sometimes, and we take a hard stance. But we have to remember, as MP Khalid said, we are here to represent our constituents, and we do that to the best possible way. So I would thank Mr. Brock for those comments. I found that to be a sign of possible positive directional move for this committee. Not sure how long that will last. I see some smiles and some minor head nods from some of my colleagues from across the way. But I heard the minister very clearly answer the questions, that no, he's not that person, that no, he wasn't on those calls or those text messages. And again, going back to the things we said earlier, are we guilty before we're proven innocent? Are we going to use speculation and news stories to drive the way this committee does its work? Are we going to bring in regular Canadians? Are we going to bring in business people from across the country and grill them and have them face scrutiny that they don't deserve? I hope not. I look at my colleagues and say, look, there's ways that we can ask the tough questions. There's ways that we can get the answers that people need. We've got our commissioners. We can rely on them. That's their jobs. They're tasked with doing those jobs. He's, the commissioner that was here on Tuesday is a neutral and independent officer, and he will make the call whether the act has been violated based on the information that he has, based on the speculation. He said he'll look into it. I don't know why we wouldn't just give him pause to do that work. I don't see head nods for necessarily supporting, waiting for his thoughts on this. But I also would like to hope that we are not in this business for anything other than to represent our constituents and not just try to score political points. I will say it's been very clear on committees for the last year or so that the clip rules. I've seen MPs get their clips, close up their iPads, their work is done, they got their clip, they download it to social media. They may or may not say things like, reach out to the Liberal members of this committee and tell them that you're angry with them. I see that. I see it happening. I follow MP Khalid on social media. I love her social media. I will tell you that I've seen some horrifying comments made her way. And if you listen to her words today, when she spoke here at committee, she talked about caring, she talked about respect, she talked about, on one of our many suspensions, Mr. Chair, I watched her go over and, give another member a hug. That's what we should be aspiring to. We should be aspiring to respecting each other, working together to find out the answers, not throwing speculation into the wind and hoping to get a wonderful piece of social media gold that will rile up supporters that are probably already supporters of the members that do this. It's like going to a debate. Sometimes you're not really converting any new voters. Your social media is your followers on social media tend to be people that support you already. I met Minister Boissonneau in 2014 in Edmonton Pride Parade when I was a municipal councillor. And I will tell you that I was impressed with him that day, and he did everything he could to keep up to the then leader of the Liberal Party. One of them remained dry. One of them was not. So I'll let you guess which one was the out of breath and which one wasn't out of breath. But what I saw was a person that cared about people. I saw a person that cared about his community and wanting desperately to want to represent the people in that community. I know he said to me before he represents everyone in the community, not just the people that vote for him. Well, I'd like to think that we're all that way. So I would hope that we would get to a point where we don't make these allegations, where we can put the tough questions out. Again, I've been in committees for 8.5 years, and I've seen some pretty heated conversations between opposition members and cabinet ministers, but I haven't seen what I saw Tuesday, and I haven't seen what I've started to see creeping into other committees now, which is a level of disrespect for another colleague, not just for a cabinet minister, not just for someone who's in a position of power, but for a colleague, someone who 8 years ago would have walked over across the aisle and sat down with you and said, "How's your family?" That happens a lot less, and that's heartbreaking. Again, I go back to my point. Maybe it has something to do with the fact that committees don't travel anymore. Maybe, Mr. Chair, maybe we need to find a way to get this committee to go travel somewhere. I know my best friends on the opposition side are the people that I have traveled with on committee travel. They are the people that I still see, still high five walking down the street, still ask them about their son's, how their son's doing or their daughter's doing or how their family's doing. How are they making out? How's their mental health here in the Hill when you're here from January to June and September to December when you're away from your families? I used to lean on people from all the parties more than I do now. I still have a few people that I'm able to lean on from other parties, but what I see in committees these days is taking us in the opposite direction. And again, I go back to my points. I don't believe that that's what Canadians want from us. I believe Canadians want to see us ask the tough questions, hold people to account, ensure that we get the answers, but do it in a respectful way. And I don't think Canadians believe in the philosophy of guilty till you're proven innocent. It should be innocent till you're proven guilty. There's nothing I heard from the minister on Tuesday that made me think that he was anything other than a good standing person who cares about people, cares about his country, and cares about his constituents. So to have him rake through the coals when, again, let's get the commissioner to take a look if he wants to take a look. That's his job. Ask those questions. Find out if there's something. But to say in the House of Commons, and I only reiterate this point because my jaw fell to the ground in question period when I heard this, that the commissioner was opening an investigation or reinvestigating, which, again, these things aren't true. He has said he believes in facts, not speculation, and that any new information that comes towards him will be looked at. That's his job. That's the job description that he's responsible for. We all appreciate him and know that he's someone of extremely high character. So I would not see why this committee would support allowing the commissioner to do his job. Mr. Chair, I think I'll leave it there for a bit and then possibly come back and if I hear any other things that I may want to comment on. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fisher. We've got till 2 o'clock now, so we're going to continue till 2. Mr. Cooper, suivi par Monsieur Villemure. Allez, go ahead, Mr. Cooper, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. The Minister of Employment is under an ethical cloud with serious questions about whether he contravened the Conflict of Interest Act, the Lobbying Act, and may have contravened the criminal code. Let's look at the facts. First, the minister is connected to one Kirsten Poon. She is the minister's former business partner. She runs and owns a lobbying firm called Navis Group. Navis Group happens to pay the minister. The minister claims it's for work that he had done previously before being elected, except that he has also said that he has never done any work for Navis Group, which raises questions about why he is being paid by Navis Group. In any event, the minister was a junior minister of finance when Kirsten Poon, his business partner, was lobbying not only this Liberal government, but this minister's own department. Twice, Ms. Poon lobbied officials in the minister's then department, and in the process secured more than $100 million in grants to her clients. This raises serious questions about the fact that the Minister of Employment was being paid by a firm that was lobbying his department and securing a sizable amount in the way of grants for her clients. Now, the minister has very selectively noted that the ethics commissioner is not opening an investigation, but when he was asked about whether he has received a similar response from the lobbying commissioner, of course he couldn't answer in the affirmative because the lobbying commissioner has indicated that she is looking into the issue of whether the minister contravened the Lobbying Act by the very fact that his business partner, someone who he was being paid from, was lobbying his department. And similarly, he could provide no assurance that the RCMP haven't opened an investigation. Certainly, there would seem to be some serious questions about whether the minister violated the Lobbying Act. But it doesn't end there. There are other issues, other ethical issues that this minister faces involving a company called Global Health Imports. It's a company that he and his then business partner, Stephen Anderson, founded shortly after Mr. Boissonnault lost his seat in the 2019 election. This is a company that held itself out as selling PPE. Needless to say, it is a company that engaged in a whole host of shady business activities, including during the time that Mr. Boissonnault held himself out as a partner at Navis Group. Indeed, the Alberta Court of King's Bench has awarded clients of Global Health Imports who have sued Global Health Imports $7.8 million in default judgments that have been ordered by Alberta courts. And Mr. Boissonnault says that he has, since being elected, had nothing to do with Global Health Imports, aside from the fact that he owns a 50% interest in the company, which he is lawfully able to do. But now there are legitimate questions about whether that, in fact, is the case, or whether, on the contrary, the minister was involved in the business operations of Global Health Imports. And those questions arise from a Global News report in which text messages were reported on and leaked that indicate that there is a Randy involved in Global Health Imports. And it arises, the context of the text messages is in relation to a shady business deal that occurred in September of 2022. In September of 2022, Mr. Boissonnault was a minister of the Crown, as he is today. And at issue is, as far as the text messages go, are with respect to a California-based client who was purchasing PPE from Global Health Imports. And that company ended up wiring over a $500,000 U.S. deposit to Global Health Imports. And there was some back and forth between Global Health Imports and the California-based client. And during that back and forth, there was a text message from Stephen Anderson, the partner, the other individual who I think owns 50% of the company, but holds himself out as the COO, of Global Health Imports, who said to the California-based client, "What is going on? I just received this from Randy." And then there is a message from Randy to Anderson talking about how it was so critical that the California-based client deposit the $500,000 U.S. to Global Health Imports. Now, why is that significant or of concern? Well, first of all, if the minister was involved in any aspect of operating the business, as this Randy appears to be, in being involved in a wire transfer of $500,000 to Global Health Imports, someone who told Anderson in the text message, "Be available in 15 for a partner call." So a partner, or someone who viewed himself as a partner at Global Health Imports, when if that Randy happens to be the minister, then the minister plainly contravened the Conflict of Interest Act, because the Conflict of Interest Act provides that ministers may not be involved to serve as directors or to be involved in a business. They may have an ownership stake, but they may not be involved in those operations. So that's number one. Second of all, there is a lawsuit that is before the Alberta Court of King's Bench from the California-based client alleging, among other things, fraud by Global Health Imports with respect to its PPE purchase. The PPE was never delivered, and the deposit, the $500,000 deposit from Global Health Imports, was never returned. The case is fairly strong. I believe they even obtained an attachment order from the Alberta Court of King's Bench, which, among other things, in order to obtain, the court must be satisfied that there is a reasonable likelihood that the claim would be established. And the minister, and so it is a situation where if the Randy in the text message is the minister, then we have a minister who may have been involved in a transaction that involves fraud. And the minister has said, well, I'm not that Randy. It's some other Randy. Okay, well, you might say, well, there could be a lot of Randys, except when we look at the minister, he was previously a partner of Global Health Imports. In the text messages, he's telling the COO, Anderson, be available in 15 for a partner call. He has a 50% stake in the company. That's a pretty significant stake in a company. The company, Global Health Imports, is not a big company. When the minister appeared before a committee, he admitted that it comprises of a handful of people. It appears there are only 4 or 5 people that are involved in Global Health Imports. So the question is, who is this Randy? Who is a partner at this 4 or 5 person company? It shouldn't be that difficult to track down who this other Randy is. But this other Randy can't be tracked down. The COO, Mr. Anderson, said there is some other Randy. It's not the minister, but he couldn't really remember his last name. This being his business partner who's telling him be available in 15 for a partner call involving a wire transfer of $500,000 US. He can't remember his last name, can't say who it is. He said this Randy, who doesn't have a last name, was involved in logistics, except when Global News looked into who is involved in logistics at Global Health Imports, it turns out to be Stephen Anderson's father, Edward Anderson. So his story doesn't add up. On top of it, not adding up that this Randy doesn't have a last name, or he never knew what it was. Global News tried to track down this other Randy. They couldn't track him down. The minister says it's not him, but he has provided no explanation as to who this other Randy could be, and hasn't accounted for that and his strong connection to this Global Health Imports company, including owning half of it. It wouldn't be very difficult for Minister Boissonnault to pick up the phone or text Stephen Anderson and say, who is the other Randy? But I guess Stephen Anderson wouldn't be able to help him because Stephen Anderson can't remember his last name. It is absolutely farcical. It's absolutely farcical. It doesn't take a rocket scientist. It simply is a matter of common sense to realize that the reason that Randy Boissonnault can't track down the other Randy is because there is no other Randy. It is the Minister of Employment. And unless this mysterious Randy suddenly shows up, then we have a minister who contravened the Conflict of Interest Act, and we have a minister who is mired in a business transaction that is facing serious allegations of fraud, a lawsuit that the California-based client even obtained an attachment order from the Alberta Court of King's Bench based on the strength of its action against the Global Health Imports company. And so we need answers. It's not good enough for the minister to come here and say it's some other Randy that no one can find in the face of text messages from someone who was his former business partner who he has involving a company that he has a 50% interest in, and that has only a handful of people who work there. So I would say highly suspicious, and on that basis, it is important that this committee get to work, call Stephen Anderson, Kirsten Poon, the California-based client, and let's find out who the other Randy is. Let's find out who the other Randy is. I'd like to see this mysterious other Randy. I think the clerk's going to have a real tough time tracking him down. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Okay, merci, Monsieur Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Cooper. Next, we have Mr. Villemur.
Build a Fisher. Monsieur Villemur, commencez.
Mr. Villemur, you have the floor. Thank you very much, Chair. Rest assured, I will not be holding up the committee today. When we're in our committee right now, we hear from people. We hear from people on subjects that interest us. But I was never very comfortable with the fact that our committee can act like a court. We are not a court. I don't think that we render decisions here and there. Ethics is about clearing the way. It's about providing light in a sometimes dark place in order to provide the right decision. And sometimes we have to, and we cannot make suppositions. And when there is a supposition from the outset, this becomes problematic. A former premier in Quebec that was well revered by most once said something in Latin, which translates to, listen to the other leave. And in a situation like this one, the ethics commissioner didn't say that he would investigate. He said he's going to see. He's going to take a look at it. Personally, I think it's a good thing that he can shed some light on this. But I'll go back to my saying here. I would also be interested in hearing from the other party, to give those people the chance to talk, to give their version of the facts, without it being shrouded in accusation. It's good to find a path and shed some light, but to make accusations before the facts are presented, I disagree with that. It could be a good idea to hear from some of the parties here. However, I wouldn't want this to go on forever, because one of the other concerns I have with this committee is that we start a lot of studies, but we don't finish them. And it's frustrating to me because you're not going to get to the finish line if you just keep starting over. So I'd ask my committee colleagues to be wise. Be wise enough to make the sound decision on this file, and put your heart into it, put your head into it as well, and don't forget about your ethics. I think this idea of hearing from the other Randy is valid, but I don't think it should be an obstacle. We all are targeted by online messages that are more or less pleasant, and to put a civilian through that because there is prejudice brought about here makes me uneasy. At the end of the day, we still need to shed light on issues. If giving our jobs meaning means providing guidance and just leveling accusations is not a good start to that. Thank you.
Okay, merci, Monsieur Villemur. Mr. Housefather.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I take, je prends à cœur.
I fully heard what my colleague said. I think that there are two things at play here. First of all, the ethics commissioner was here and said during his testimony that he didn't have anything to criticize Mr. Boissonneau about because he followed the law. The witnesses here have nothing to do with the issue that was raised at the last meeting. The issue was about the new texts that spoke of the other Randy. But the rest of the witness list here that is proposed has nothing to do with those text messages. One party litigating against a company where Monsieur Boissonneau was not working or had no relation with since 2021 is a factor. We were saying that we will want to be hearing from someone that has never met Mr. Boissonneau, that's never done business with Mr. Boissonneau, because there is litigation ongoing involving a company that Mr. Boissonneau left in 2021. So I believe that this is an overreach in this motion. Mr. Anderson is included. Mr. Boissonneau mentioned Mr. Boissonneau. So maybe we could ask Mr. Anderson who that person was. But apart from that, I believe that this motion seeks to bring forth people before the committee in a context where the commissioner himself said that these other people have nothing to do with Mr. Boissonneau. So I think that the best thing to do now would be to listen to the commissioner and to let him study this, look into it. I think that the best thing the committee can do is to let the commissioner study it and give him the time to do that with all the tools that the commissioner has. And then if the commissioner comes back and says that he's not satisfied, then we can call witnesses. But if the commissioner investigates and is satisfied, for me, it's all good. We can continue on with our work. I believe that some colleagues are accusing Mr. Boissonneau of things without having evidence for it. They said that they're convinced that Mr. Boissonneau has been involved in a company that he quit in 2021. The commissioner said that this was not the case based on all the messages between the commissioner's office and Mr. Boissonneau's office. I think that this is shameful to see that we do not have faith and trust in a minister saying what he's saying. I think that we should act in good faith and assume that when a witness comes before this committee and says something, that they're saying the truth. And I got to say, Chair, that after Mr. Boissonneau left the committee meeting, he gave us the documents that we asked for. I'm looking at some documents on my phone here, Mr. Chair. Mr. Boissonneau was in Vancouver. Everybody knows that Mr. Boissonneau was in Vancouver at the time because there was a cabinet retreat. He provided us of his phone records from that day. He contacted TELUS. TELUS gave Mr. Boissonneau the information for all of the calls on September 8, 2022. I'm seeing here a record of a call at 8:08 a.m., 11:05 a.m., 11:07, 11:12, 5:37, 5:39, 5:56, 7:52, 7:56, and 8:03 p.m. All these phone calls form the complete record of calls as provided by TELUS, and there were no calls to or from Mr. Boissonneau that would involve Mr. Boissonneau's alleged implication within this company.
Yes?
Go ahead on your point of order, Mr. Barrett.
So it's been an observance by government members at this committee that unless documents are properly received by the chair and the clerk and circulated in both official languages, that they not be entered into evidence, even if shared as a matter at hand at the committee. And so incomplete records or records from one of multiple phones, it's irrelevant. And it's also documents that are shared with some members of the committee. It's not appropriate unless these have been properly distributed to all members, including our members who aren't regular members but are participating today.
So So I do appreciate that, and we did deal with this, I recall, when the RCMP commissioner was here. It has been the practice in the past, Mr. Housefather, that any information that's been received has been shared with the committee. I can assure you that first and foremost, we're in receipt of the correspondence from Mr. Boissonneau. It's in translation right now, and it will be distributed when that translation is complete. So the difficulty for other members, and I'm sure you can appreciate this, is that they don't have access to the same information that you have at this point. So until that information is shared, I'd ask, sir, if you would just sort of hold off on what you're referring to, because I think, in fairness to the committee, that's the appropriate course of action. So,
On that point of order, Mr. Chair,
go ahead.
Are the things that are being said during debate on this motion considered testimony or evidence? That's not the same as when you have a witness before you sharing things that the committee's not privy to. This is debate. I will tell you that next to nothing that Mr. Cooper said in his entire speech is something that I had.
Now you're into debate.
Duly sent to the committee clerk by a minister and has not been translated and sent to all members of the committee.
And I've made my position clear, and I'm going to ask that you respect that, Mr. Housefather, that this information is going to be shared in both official languages very shortly, I hope. And then it won't put members on their back heels of the fact that you've got information that they don't have. This was sent to the clerk. It was sent by the minister for distribution. It hasn't been distributed yet. If you have access to something that the other committee members don't have access to, I'm just going to ask that you hold off on it until we're able to get it in their hands, sir. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Chair, although given that this is relevant to a motion that was raised today at the committee, then why are we debating a motion without having this actually in front of us? You cannot argue that we're going to rush and put forward a motion and negate evidence that was brought to us by the minister that was actually requested by the Conservative members at the last meeting, and then say I can't refer to it to say that I oppose the motion they're putting forward to bring witnesses to the committee. So that to me is actually not a reasonable prospect, Mr. Chair. So I move to adjourn debate on this motion until such time as Mr. Boissonneau's documents are translated and sent to the committee.
All right. We have a motion to adjourn debate, and I would ask whether we have consensus to adjourn debate. We do not. So I'm going to ask the clerk to take the roll. Then the motion is to adjourn debate.
Motion to adjourn the debate. Mr. Baines.
Yes.
Ms. Diab. Thumbs up, yes. Mr. Fisher. Yes. Mr. Housefather.
Yes.
Ms. Thompson.
Yes.
Mr. Brett.
No.
Mr. Dodal. No. Mr. Kmich.
No.
Monsieur Villemur.
No.
Mr. Green.
No.
Yeas 5, nays 5.
And I vote no.
Yeas 5, nays 6.
Okay, so the motion is defeated. And who's next
Point
on?
of order. I wasn't asked for my vote. Is that appropriate that I be skipped?
Is Mr. What's his name again? Longfield? Longfield. Is Mr. Longfield on the list?
At this point, I called Ms. Diab and Ms. Thompson.
Ms. Diab and Ms. Thompson were on our list, but Just hang on a sec.
I may be losing track of the many substitutions. Let me, if there's a latest substitution, let me verify.
Just on
Yeah,
point of
'cause I
order,
also-
Chair, would
I
that
also-
change the outcome of the vote if
I still don't, I don't
Mr. Lo-
have the
if Mr.
information in front of me for the debate either, so of course I wouldn't vote for this.
We are able to vote.
Okay. So it's not going to change the result of the vote. We had Ms. Diab and Ms. Thompson as subbed in. They both voted on the motion, so it's not going to change the result of the vote. Mr. Green, I do see your hand. I assume that you want to be on the speaking list, sir?
This is the point of order on the ability to reference documents that have been received. I would agree that that it is not testimony. Look, there are all types of ways in which communications could have happened, whether it was a personal phone or whether it was a government phone or God knows what. We haven't determined that, but I do think procedurally it would be appropriate for the members of any members of this committee, including the government side, to be able to reference a document that is in circulation. I do think that is appropriate.
Okay, well, I
Distributed to the committee. It's numbers, doesn't need to be translated as much because it's all phone numbers, right?
yeah, there's, the clerk has assured me that it'll be very soon, because it's a smaller document to translate. So I'm going to accept that, Mr. Fisher. I want to make sure that everybody has this in their hands, so I am going to suspend for a couple of minutes until we have it in your hands. Mr. Longfield, we'll come back. Your hand is still up, I assume?
Chair,
Yeah.
before you drop the gavel, we're 26 minutes from question period. You're going to suspend, but
Yeah,
the duration isn't clear.
Well,
right?
we said till 2 o'clock, or just before 2. That's what I said.
Okay.
So we're going to suspend for a couple of minutes.